This is Entrepreneur Radio, maximizing your personal and business results by leading with your heart. With your host, Terri Levine. Listen every week as Terri tackles the topics that will help you become a successful heart-centered entrepreneur. Be sure to read the blog posts at www.heartrepreneur.com/blog. Come back often and add this show to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes. You can also follow Terri on Twitter at MentorTerri and on Facebook.com/Heartrepreneur Terri Levine. And now here's Terri.
Hello and welcome to Heartrepreneur Radio and TV show with Terri Levine. I'm your co-host, Val McGallant, and I'm super excited to be here today. You can connect with Terri, me, and other like-minded heart-based business owners in the Heartrepreneurs with Terri Levine Facebook group, so go check it out. And if you like our show, and like this show in particular, be sure to hit that like button, and we always love those 5-star reviews, and be sure to subscribe. Today's quote: "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." Socrates. Today's show topic: the regenerative life. Our special guest this week is Carol Sanford. Carol is a senior fellow of the social innovation with Babson College. She's the CEO of the Regenerative Paradigm Institute, educator, and social change designer. She's the author of 5 best-selling books, including The Regenerative Life: Transform Any Organization, Our Society, and Your Destiny. She has received 22 gold awards thus far for her books. All 5 books are built around case stories of specific transformation in people, business, community, and regions. She's the executive producer of the Regenerative Business Summit and producer and on-air talent for Business Second Opinion podcast. Welcome to the show, Carol.
Thank you, Velma.
I am super excited about this conversation. I love the subject of change because, as we all know, it's the only constant is that change is what we get. And I'd really love to hear what your view of change is.
I think there are many different ways to define it. I say there are different paradigms. Mine comes from a regenerative view, which means you're not changing towards some ideal you have out in the future, but rather from learning to express your own essence more deeply every day. So it's like it's already there, it's in us, but we have something called personality, which is socialized. It's not a bad thing, but it's socialized, conditioned, which is not always us. And the whole idea is to be able to have our essence use personality in a way to serve it, not the other way around. And when our little shortfalls, which we all have in our personality, because, you know, we grow up in a world where we react, respond, then when we are primarily driven by that, we may lose us.
Oh, I like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. I know that in the introduction of your book, you said that your theory of change is rooted in the evolutionary potential of human lives, and that's what I'm hearing in what you described there.
Yes, and it's there are a certain kind of an Eastern way and a Western way of talking about evolution. In the Western way, we have a progressive mind. You're here, and then you do this, and you're here, and then you're here, and you're all going towards something. The Eastern worldview, and it's not as preeminent anymore, except in some wisdom traditions, is there is something in some way you are about, and it is coming toward you. It is coming into you from it's not exactly the future, but it's in a sense that what is there is seeking to be. And I often joke and say, you know, Darwin looked at evolution through the beak changing on a bird. In an Eastern view, they believe it's trying to get closer and closer to what the beak is that's perfect for that bird. You don't have to figure it out except to understand you will evolve by getting closer to the deeper part of you I call essence.
I love it. So really as we're changing, or evolving, we're actually moving towards who we really are.
Yep.
Who we already are.
Yep.
And uncovering it. Actually, it almost sounds like we're coming out from underneath the blanket of life.
Very much. I call it a developmental view, and the word development means to remove the veil, de-veil. And so the work we're doing is, I tell people, don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out all your flaws and go do a lot of personal development to fix all those. You can't unless what you're doing is really supplanting it. And so the work that we're talking about here is removing the veil to get to essence. And then I say, I only work on those personality traits, those things that are overdone kind of parts of me, recycles, excesses. I only work on the ones that get in the way of me expressing essence. Reduces it a lot, and it gets us focused, and we usually can accomplish a lot with very few focuses.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because I know it's really easy to look at myself and see those flaws, those things that I and probably others have determined are not appropriate. Exactly. And told me. It's really easy to focus in those places rather than how do I really see me? What would it take for me to really see me?
Right. And of course, women are worse at this than anything else. We assume anytime something didn't work, that what's happening is our fault. And we can list all the things that are our fault. And I call those getting into energy drains in this book. There are 6 core energy drains that we will spin off into. I don't know whether that would be helpful to list, but just to know. Yes. Okay. So yes. I'll quickly, the first one is what I call fabrication, which is we make up out of whole cloth ideas in our head that never existed. He did that to me because, or she thinks this about me. It's all fabrication, and it can become obsessions. The second one is identification, where I get identified with a way of seeing the world or an ideology, like my son, the doctor. And then if he doesn't go to be the doctor we thought he was going to be, I lose my identity. Or what my husband believes, or president believes, or minister believes. And we can get identified. And if that is shaken at all, it shakes us rather than going back to essence. Waste is the third one, where what we're doing is engaging in things, speaking about things, e.g. gossip, which have no productive outcome that anyone wants to see. Fear, and fear is the fourth one, where it's always about me not being able to figure out how to relate myself to things in the world. When we become afraid because of family members dying, and we've never had anyone dying before, we become terribly afraid because death is unfamiliar. That's why the sages and saints say meditation is about dying a little every day, getting used to it, working on letting go, releasing things. The last two are attachments, where I assume the world is fixed and will never change. And particular things that I want to change, my life partner, my boss, my subordinate, somebody who works for me, I assume they're fixed. And those attachments we have to things being fixed, nothing is fixed. As you started the show, Velma was saying, it's all about change. So attachment is the opposite. And the final one is solipsism, or being self-referential. The world, solip means sun. The sun revolves around me. So I'm so self-centered, and that never serves us because we live in a nested world. So if you're engaged, and probably are like me, once, twice, 100 times a day, I mean, one or more of those, they collude and become in my head craziness. Now, you only start to look for those things as you're saying, wait, how do I bring my essence forward? So if you're in a disruptive event where you're afraid, I began to ask myself, and you hear this, I have different ways of doing it than others, but what is my work here? What is mine to do? What is mine to bring forward? And how, when I'm in my highest self, would I do that? That calms down and quiets those 6 things being there. And then if I know and have looked in advance of which are my big patterns in those drains, I can even advance say which of those is likely to show up. Like if you're afraid, I'm not afraid of being on TV, but if you are, you can get all 6 of those going the minute I've got you interviewing me, right? But if in advance I say what's going to happen, then I might say, well, I have an attachment to what TV hosts are like, and I'm going to watch that because otherwise I'm not going to be very much fun to interview. So you can use it in planning, you can use it watching yourself in life, and you certainly can use it in your journal every evening.
So really, we can use these as a tool. The visual I got while I was listening to you is these 6 core energy drains. It's almost like having 6 of the little devils on my shoulders.
Yeah, it's very true. Or hundreds. Those are just the arenas they happen in. But yes, it's like they can show up at any time. But we can, if we go back and go to the core of ourselves, what I'm calling essence, those suddenly we have separated ourselves. We're now watching. Some people call it a witness. I call it self-observing. And I can see me say, Carol, do you see what you're doing? Listen to that message you just sent through your head. Is that going to be helpful to you? Well, what would be helpful? Now I've invited Essence to coach me, right? To become my own inner support system. I call it resourcing, where you're returning yourself, or if you're being a resource for someone else, you're returning them to themselves as a source, not
I like that.
all the dancing crazy messages in my head.
I like that a lot. So fabrication, when I heard that one, the first thing I thought about is how we add meaning to everything.
Yeah, whether it exists or not.
Exactly. And identification, that one made a lot of sense to me personally, because I know as I was transitioning out of my marriage, I had a lot of experiences where, first one was I'm no longer wife, right?
Exactly.
My son goes and lives with his dad. I'm no longer mother, and I had all of these identities being removed. And as much as it hurt at that time, it was actually really a blessing, because once the identities were removed, all that was left was me.
Yeah. It takes most people a very, very long time to let go of the identities, and some never make it. But if you want to reinvent your life, regenerate your life, as I'm talking about in this book, you start with you. And I give people 9 roles in this book, which are like archetypes, meta role, that help them in a situation where, like parenting, you redefine not as having children, but the essence of parenting always was, always will be, helping someone discover their own, be self-determining, be in charge of where they're going. So you can also take a role you have a lot of familiarity with on the low end and on the high end. And I define the essence of each of these roles. And again, they're not you. I'm not talking about you as a parent. I'm talking about when you're in an archetype, you help everyone discover their essence. You work on everyone being self-determining. So often I find that coaches and mentors and even trainers or facilitators can be, if they remember that all of us need parenting. And that doesn't mean we had to give birth. I raised 8 children, 2 of whom I gave birth to, 2 of whom married, and 4 who I call them I chose, because their families were troubled and my kids brought them home, and eventually they lived with me. I paid for Oni's college and her wedding, and her kids call me grandma. I would never give birth to her, but I helped her give birth to her life in a new way. So the roles help us find it. There again, I'm talking about essence thinking. So you and I started with the essence of me, but everything alive, therefore the regenerative life, has an essence. A life shed instead, I don't call them watersheds because that makes it like where our water came from, but it's a living entity. And you can, if you're an earth tender, learn to see everything alive in a system working, doing its work together, and you learn to see essence is the foundation of life.
Hey there, it's Terri Levine. I just wanted to pop in for just a moment as you're listening here to Heartrepreneur Radio and watching Heartrepreneur TV. We have so many new and exciting things going on. So you can watch a free masterclass. Highly recommend to get a conveyor belt of qualified prospects. That's at TL, like Terri Levine, tlwebinar.com. Head over there, enjoy it, keep listening and sharing the show.
I want to make sure, I just want to take a quick pause here. I want to make sure that our listeners know how to connect with you, because what I'm hearing is that a lot of this information, so a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs, and a lot of this information, it sounds to me like would be really valuable to tap into as we're building our businesses, understanding one is which roles do we connect with most deeply? Because I mean, I'm listening to you talking about parenting, and I'm like, oh, I'm not in every area of my life.
Yeah, well, it's true. Oh, the website is carolsanford.com. I bet everybody can remember that. CarolSanford. But the key is to learn to use these 9 roles live in real time. You will use all of them. You will need to, because one of them is entrepreneur. And I talk about the essence of entrepreneurship. Another one is media content creator. You and I are sitting here creating content media. What is the essence of that? I say that it's really being able to see how reality works, right? Whenever we're writing or presenting or working on a blog, our real job is not to convince people of what we're sure is right, but give them a way to see how things work. And my foreword is written by NPR host Tanya Mosley for Here and Now. And she was also this was all done from an action research project with 160 people from 6 months to 9 months with me. And she was in that. She said it profoundly affected her thinking about when she steps in front of the microphone. But she's also a parent. She's also an entrepreneur. She also can be an economic shaper and a citizen and a spirit resource, which often coaches are too, and an earth tender and a designer, and finally an educator. So I just gave you a quick listing of the 9. You do all of those, and they may all happen within a few minutes. You may be in an entrepreneurial role, and suddenly you need, more education is needed here. I've got to step into that. So it's not picking a role in advance, it's learning the fluidity of being and bringing what is needed. And I do this with Google. So you're right, it's in business. I do it with hundreds of young businesses and also larger ones, like you probably know Numi Tea. They're one of my sponsors. Wonderful tea company. So these are roles, less tools, because tools mean I got a hammer and I hit everything with it, right? Instead, I ask, what's going on in this situation? What's called for right now? I don't want to get identified with I'm now always an entrepreneur, because sometimes I may need to step aside. And when you have children, how often you have to switch. So hopefully that gives a taste of their use.
It really does. And it gave me an observation of how easily I can get into the trap of identifying with my role.
Yeah.
So I have a 19-year-old boy. So jumping into the parenting, that's almost 20. Oh my goodness.
I know.
Jumping into the parenting role is really easy. And especially at his age, there are times where I need to step out of the parenting role.
Yeah.
And just allow things to occur. And probably there would be other of those roles, if I had more familiarity with them, that I would be pulling in during those conversations with my son.
You can learn more because I wrote a book about it. But
I know, right?
The important thing is to not ask which of these roles am I. People are used to the Jungian archetypes or to typology tests. I'm not a big fan of any of those. Well, I think Jung was onto something, but what people have done with it, me, the psychologist, goes crazy looking at what they did. Don't, when you read my book, say, oh, I really identify with the earth tender, or, oh, I could see me, that was me. And I said, nope, the roles are not you. They are capes you put on, like, although I say you have to be in a non-heroic role. These are non-heroic ways to bring change, because you're not going in and every time rescuing, which of course, again, women have a lot of a tendency to do, but men do too. They hide it better. So don't think you are any of these roles. They are instruments for you to put on when they're needed. And maybe 5 minutes later, you say, oh, okay, I got to shift gears. I'm not working on the right way here. I need to go from trying to be whatever it is that I was doing to an educator, because I can see there's missing understanding here. And the educator is about lifting up people's intelligence so they can think more comprehensively about complexity. So I'm always putting in this caution, don't get identified with any of these or they won't be of any use to you.
Well, then it turns into your energy drains again.
Yes. You got it already. You don't even have to read the book. No.
No, I definitely want to read the book.
I think it has more on the energy drains. It has exercises. As I said, it was an action learning project where I had people learning how to do these things with me. And then they would go off and apply it in some arena of their life. Then this book is filled. I've forgotten how many stories are in it, like 80 stories of people transforming how it was they were working. And most of them are in their work roles, but we've got people who were parents, even though they're entrepreneurs, who wrote parenting stories. We've got university professors. And as I said, people like Tanya, who runs Here and Now on NPR, their stories of how they use this are in the book, because that's what the point of the learning and research project was.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned something about not putting on the capes, the roles in a heroic way. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Those of us who in life seek to learn also have another characteristic which can drag us through all 6 energy drains, which is we want desperately to make a difference. And people say to you, pick something you're passionate about. And I said, no, please don't pick something you're passionate about. The word passion means pain. It literally comes from its root is about pain, because it means we get identified with something. And then we can become unclear. What you want is to quietly every day not feeling like you have to save the world. And people, you'll ask them what they want to do in their life. And I used to do this, so I know. I always say, save the world, right? I want to save the planet. All of those are acting as though we are independent Marvel comic heroes. I'm Wonder Woman, and we put on things to help from that kind of role. It's more about quietly every day. Where real change happens is if you are a supervisor every day, how you engage with your people. You quietly go to the closet that has the educator in it even though you're a supervisor, and you engage with that person in helping them learn and grow. Or you go to the closet and you pull out the designer one, because you can see the way we've designed this work system isn't working. I'm going to put that on and I'm going to use it with the educator role and maybe the spirit resource. And I'm going to create a set of events here for all the people who love working in my company or in my unit. And I'm going to design from that. That's a quiet, non-heroic way. And I talk quite a bit about the working from a non-heroic way at the beginning of the book. So all of these are not designed to be Marvel characters. They're designed to be you in life, in everything you touch, asking, what's the right way to do this?
I like that, because what I'm hearing is it's actually the roles that we bring in are ways of being, versus the heroic passion is more of a doing.
Yeah. You end up doing, all of us end up ultimately doing, but we do it, I would say, with a different being. So we switch beings. We switch from I got to get this kid not to do that, or this employee for me, or this governing official. We go in with, I call it the billiard ball model of change, where there's a pocket we think they should be in. We can see who needs to go there. We're operating the cue stick, and we got a method. We hit it to get them in the pocket. That's heroic. If, on the other hand, I'm using more of a quantum view, it's much more indirect. And we now know this is the way the world works. We actually aren't structured as a billiard ball table. We all have indirect effects, and the indirect is more important. So again, I'm going to use a child example, because I know women in divorce particularly are always torn with how in the world to engage with their children. And when we're in the billiard ball model, we want to tell them what we're doing, what's going on, how they need to respond, get them in therapy. And I'm not saying don't get kids in therapy, but we want, or ourselves, right? But that's direct. The indirect is engaging in a process with some, it's why coaches end up existing in the world, right? It's an indirect. The coach normally, if they're meeting the way I think a spirit resource is, they aren't telling people, go do this, giving them feedback, which is direct. Instead, they're helping them learn to think about themselves and how it is they see the world, and how's that working for you, and give them a different framework to think through. This book is designed to be a different framework for change. As I say, a new theory of change in the book. And so I'm working as an educator with this book, rather than a prescriber of, here's the template, here's the 5 steps, go do this, or in a coach saying, here's the model you should use. When you do that billiard ball model versus the indirect work of growing, developing people's capability, helping them become more able to see themselves, you and they will soon be exhausted, because any one thing we give them to try, we don't know whether it'll work. What we need is them to have the capability to pick their own pocket they're going to. And even in real time with children, we want to say, don't do that. And here's why, and here's what you have to learn. Kids are not in an emotional state in the moment to be put in the right billiard ball pocket. What we need is to be building their capability in advance. Like, what are you going to do with that? Well, it's X and Y. How do you expect that to work? Where do you think it will go? And this is great with almost 20-year-olds. I have a 21-year-old grandson. You instead say, well, all right, how did that work? Did that go the way you thought it would? What do you think you would do different next time? And I talk about research I did with 9-year-olds to help them overcome the tendency toward lying, which kids, if anything goes wrong when they're younger, they'll fabricate, and they can't see they're fabricating it. So this process of teaching kids to be self-observing before they take an action, then after, that's really more what the work of the parenting would look like, rather than in the moment trying to change them. That does not work. It creates restraint, resistance, argument with you, because the state of being, the being state, is not working so well. So it is true, we got to slow down the doing, but when we do, we want to work from the being that has an archetype embedded in it.
So what I'm kind of like, I got another visual that came in as you were explaining that, is it's almost like we have 9 sets of sunglasses.
Yeah.
And sometimes we put on 1 pair, sometimes we put on 3 pairs, but it's a way for us to look at the situation that we're working through or managing or understanding or whatever. And then the opportunity that's there is lining somebody else's pocket with all 9 of the
It's
sunglasses.
Really, I often talk about glasses. I like sunglasses too, because now they can be different colors. But I say to people, I give people frameworks so that they have different glasses to wear to see the world. than the ones of the mental models, which are in their head that they can't see, but are running their life. And most of them are going to be energy draining, not all of them. But I like your metaphor. I think it works well.
Well, and we don't want those glasses to be constantly attached to our face that we identify with them.
Put those down, pick up some, yeah. And I like it also because it looks like, well, I'm going to try this for a minute and I'm going to put that on. If it's not, I'm going to put that one down, or I'm going to add one to it. So I think the metaphor translates pretty well.
Well, sounds like you explained it well enough for it to catch on. So
good.
I have loved this conversation, and I'm so shocked that we actually have come to the end of our time. Yep. This is a conversation that I think could have gone on for another hour. I want to make sure that our listeners, again, know how to best connect with you.
CarolSanford.com. If they really need to reach me, I don't always respond to email quickly, but guess what my email is? Carol@CarolSanford.com. And if you go to the website, there's a thing for my podcast, for my books, how the books fit together, where all the awards came from, and various opportunities to engage in my business and other activities.
Perfect. And the name of the book, again, for those of you who are listening, is The Regenerative Life: Transform Any Organization, Our Society, Your Destiny. So thank you so much for your time today, Carol. I loved this conversation, and I love what I learned out of the conversation. And I'm excited. I am going to go out and pick up the book because it's like totally up my alley.
It's in 3 formats. So if you want the audio, the digital, or the print, they're all there.
That is good to know. That is really good to know. I know I've been doing audiobooks a lot lately. So, and I want to thank you, our listener, for coming and spending your time with us today. I hope you loved this show. Please hit that like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to come over to Facebook and look for Heartrepreneurs with Terri Levine. And you can join Terri, myself, and other heart-based entrepreneurs. And we look forward to seeing you. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Heartrepreneur Radio, maximizing your personal and business results by leading with your heart, with your host, Terri Levine. This show is produced every week for your enjoyment and education. To make sure you never miss a single show, add us to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes. You can also read Terri's latest blog posts at www.heartrepreneur.com/blog, or follow Terri on Twitter at MentorTerri, and on Facebook.com/Heartrepreneur Terri Levine. Your questions and comments are always welcome and appreciated. Send them to Terri on either Facebook or Twitter. Thank you for listening.